Hello on YouTube and Twitch, and welcome to another episode of Northstar Talks Politics. I hope you're well, are taking care of each other, and being kind to yourselves. For those new to my channel, you can check out my YouTube channel page. Previous politics videos, I don't do them that often, so you're not going to find anything on Twitch video on demand. But they are important, and when I'm inspired to put in the effort on one of these, I do it. Hopefully, usually, if I can find the energy. My long COVID is brutal. So, today I want to talk a little bit about leftist infighting and the difference of so-called leftist infighting and political infighting and the difference between infighting and debate. First of all, you've probably all heard the term leftist infighting, that and political infighting on the left, and the people on the left. They shouldn't call it leftist because it often refers to anything center-left infighting. So, establishment Democrats fighting with Bernie Sanders bros fighting with actual socialists, as if those were all leftists. They are not. The only group of those three that's actually leftist is the socialists. And even socialists are divided into democratic socialists, communists, anarcho-socialists. There's a lot of subdivisions. But the basic principle is people point to this and they think it's bad. And that is true and not true. Like anything else, it depends. I'm going to resist oversimplification. Just find a lot of it on YouTube. And try and draw a little bit of a distinction in the limited time we have available. First of all, what do people mean by infighting? Usually, they refer to it with a blanket statement. Any disagreement, any argument. And that's great, but it's human nature to debate differences, and you can't, if you don't have any debate of differences, you'll just see the groups that have the most powerful positions through, say, billionaire sponsorship, like the establishment Democrats, dominate the debate, and everyone has to line up behind them, because without debate, you can't elucidate why that group is wrong. It could be, in the Soviet Union, it would have been Orthodox communism. Whatever the dominant group is will dominate the debate. On the other hand, if people are always butting heads, they're undermining each other. What's the difference? I think the difference is people in America do not understand or have a very good ability to engage in civilized, or let me say not civilized, but restrained debate with each other, where they refrain from personal attacks sometimes, and more importantly, they can disagree with each other, but they can realize their common interests, and they can say, well, we have to discuss these issues, and we have to especially discuss them later, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't work together, because while, people in the Sanders camp are debating whether they're really socialists, but the socialists are debating with the establishment Democrats about the need to do things like nationalize the power grid, nationalize healthcare. If you're actually a Marxist, nationalize most major industries and take it out of the hands of billionaires who will inevitably exist so long as capital is in private hands. While people are debating these things, Trump administration is doing unhinged stuff like this. The United States counterterrorism strategy. This is actually the less unhinged of the two documents in itself, although it tries to say outright nonsense, like, let's see if I can find, was that, no, that was in the other document, let's see, it was in one of these, no, it's just not finding it. I know I read it, so I'm gonna have to manually, just won't do a search. So you get outright unhinged stuff like calling alliances between the left and Islamism, supposedly Red-Green Alliance. Red-Green Alliance actually refers to an alliance between environmentalists and socialists. It's got nothing to do with the nonsense that is portrayed here. I had it before. Oh, here we go. New and deepening alliances between the far left Islamists, i.e. the Red-Green Alliance. That's not what the Red-Green Alliance is. Red-Green Alliance is like the Green Party and a Socialist Party working together. Why are these intentionally conflated? Because the Trump administration is trying to establish manufacturer consent for a police state. They are going to come for you. They're going to come for me. They're going to come for anyone who disagrees with them and arrest them if they are not constrained. I mean, right now they're testing the waters with these unhinged documents, but speech in this case comes before action. They also have this countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. I've seen many versions of this that organized it into a more easily digestible set of bullet points. But basically, there's trying to call anything that's anti-fascist. These movements portray foundational American principles that use support for law enforcement and border control, as if those foundational means at the founding, as if the founding fathers were obsessed with those things, which they were not. As fascists to justify and encourage acts of violent revolution, also not true. The anti-fascist lies become blah, blah, blah. They are demonizing those who stand against fascists, which tell you everything you know, but need to know about the Trump administration. They're actually fascists. But then they try and say anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, and there was a longer list before somewhere. I'm not sure if this got edited. Oh, extremism on migration, race, and gender, and hostility towards those who traditional American values. It's nonsense, and this is outright fascist rhetoric. This is something that could have come directly out of Mussolini's administration in the 1930s or early 40s, or Hitler's. These documents may not seem that scary if you don't understand the historical context, but they are. And while this stuff goes on, you see the left fighting amongst themselves. Now, again, debate and fighting are not the same thing. And this comes, I think, partly from Americans misconstruing anyone disagreeing with them as a personal attack. That was not what I meant to open. Accidentally misclicked. Hearthstone deck tracker is going to randomly open here in a second. Probably. Someone simply disagreeing with you is not a personal attack. People have the right to say you're wrong. And that's not what's dangerous. What's dangerous is when things happen like the corporate Democrats purge the Bernie bros from the party and try to blame them for losing the 2024 election. No, you lost the election because you did not do enough about what was going on in Palestine. And the public opinion came around to this, but the Democrats dragged their heels, and enough people were ahead of them. And we must flee the center. No, the statistics show that the Democrats went way too far to the right, and they always do this. They always expect the left wing of the country to just line up behind them, and they think, oh, well, the centers will vote for us if we're just a little more to the center. No, they generally don't. There's been studies on this. People prefer the original to the imitation, is what one political scientist put it. People who have, quote, centrist views, who the mythical swing voters, will almost never vote for a center-left party that chases the center. It never works. All that it does is ban the base. And it's because Democrats don't really want to win, the corporate Democrats. There's a whole issue there with we can't stop them from engaging in infighting. They are going to do it because they answer only to billionaire donors. Blaming ourselves for it is not going to help if you're not corporate Democrat, if you're a Bernie bro, if you're a socialist, an actual socialist, because again, Bernie is not socialist, he's a social democrat. But if you're a social democrat, you're a socialist or a communist, you're not going to be able to stop. We're not to blame for the corporate Democrats doing this nonsense, but we do choose if we turn on each other. The K-Hive is going to mock leftist streamers being attacked by the Trump administration on false grounds of staying in the wrong hotel in Cuba. That can't be changed. But because the K-Hive are corporate Democrats, they are going to ultimately do the bidding of billionaires. But what can happen is the rest of us can work together in a resistance. By the way, check out Tad Stormer's A Resistance History of the United States, his book, and check out his YouTube channel. He's a public historian, focuses on the United States up until and the Civil War and during the Reconstruction era particularly, and then leading a little into Jim Crow, and how really the U.S. was founded on ethno-nationalist principles, and the radical Republicans, which were more like the Democrats today, they were the left-wing branch of the Republicans, which are the left-wing party. So this would be actually like the Bernie Bros today. The radical Republicans took over politics after the Civil War, and they forced through changes to ensure that black people would not be denied the vote, that slavery would not be reestablished, etc., etc. And the moderate Republicans had to be dragged into it kicking and streaming. And now eventually what we're doing is moving back towards that racist era. Something is not holy just because it's the foundational principles of a country. I think most people who aren't corporate Democrats, who don't buy into what's known, Tad Sturmer calls liberal nationalism, so left-wing nationalism that still puts the Founding Fathers on a pedestal they don't deserve. They were racist, misogynist slaveholders, and they were not products of their time. There were contemporaries who said what they were doing was wrong. They were just excluded from the halls of power as they are today. The critics of the Founding Fathers, the abolitionists, for instance, existed when the United States was founded. The abolitionists were just politically marginalized and kept out of power because the Founding Fathers kept them out of power. It's not because they couldn't have held power. If we're going to resist the Trump administration, we're going to make them fight for every inch of moving towards fascism, or if we're even going to do an organized movement to get out of the United States. I personally think it's too late. I don't mean to be doomerist. I think that the U.S. can't be saved from sliding to fascism, and it's going to be a long struggle to bring democracy back to the United States, at least even the bourgeois excuse for democracy we have now, or had. Because we never really had democracy. It was always controlled by wealthy special interests. Special interest groups is something you can hear people talk about in the 90s, way before Citizens United. It just got worse and worse and worse. But to even get back to there and to ideally go back to something better, because the special interest is what led us to the days of fascism, to the democratic decay that led to fascists threatening to take over now. I think people are going to need to fight to end things from outside the country. They're going to have to move to like Norway, Sweden, France, wherever, and they're going to have to organize protests abroad, and they're going to have to get countries to put sanctions on the U.S. They're going to have to pressure governments to take political refugees. Those of us who can't just pick up and leave, like myself, because I'm disabled, I would be gone already. This is not, oh, I just talk about leaving the country, but I'll never do it. I would be out of the United States tomorrow if I could legally migrate to somewhere like Norway, but I'm disabled. They won't take me unless I can support myself. My channel doesn't make any ad money yet. I need to earn. I checked. It was I think $26,500 a year for 2 years straight from YouTube to be considered eligible for a self-employment visa with Norway. So I'm trying to get to that point, and then I'm leaving. I'm going to Norway if I can ever get my channel big enough. Why? Because I believe it's going to take countries in Europe, it's going to take eventually the European Union coming down the United States and declaring it a pariah state and isolating it the same way that the U.S. has maliciously isolated Cuba. It's going to take the U.S. being isolated in the same way. Cuba, there's another war that's coming. That's something people can resist. Trump administration is trying to manufacture consent for invading Cuba. They're trying to convince Americans, though too many people already believe this, Cuba is poor because of communism. No, they are poor because they've been under U.S. sanctions. And you cannot grow rich under U.S. sanctions. Heck, even if they weren't under sanctions, a communist government in a world full of capitalist governments is going to be at a disadvantage. Not because communism is a worse system, but because their system is different than everyone else's. And there's advantages to fitting in with the crowd, such as getting foreign aid from capitalist countries that no one would provide Cuba without sanctions. They're never going to get the giant amounts of foreign aid the U.S. provides its allies. But they can't even trade freely. That's why they're poor. And now we're going to invade them. And endless war, endless oppression, and declaring people who disagree with the Trump administration enemies of the state, and turning anti-terrorism task forces inwards, trying to call it conspiracy against rights. Probably if you, I would suspect, since they don't really define this, that they would try and apply the standard to talking about nationalizing corporations, as if it was a right written into the Constitution to privately own businesses. Actually, the Constitution is fairly agnostic about property relations. This is partly because of the unfortunate legacy of slavery, let's be clear. Defining what is poverty, property would have required them to define slaves as property, would have antagonized the people who maybe envisioned that they could somehow maintain the status quo of a half-slave, half-free United States. The abolitionists were kept out of power, but the moderates were not at the time of the founding. Which is not the liberal nationalist, oh, it was a promise to the future. No, it was split between dirty slaveholders and people who thought they could keep the status quo indefinitely. That's what the U.S. was founded by. And it didn't have to be. There were people, prominent voices, who were excluded from the Constitutional Convention, who were against slavery. So, anyways, you want to resist, you can't be fighting amongst yourselves, but you have to be able to debate things. Points of doctrine, I compare it, and this is kind of the analogy I leave the guys with, theological debate. There can be discussion between religions and denominations, say Christian mainstream denominations and evangelical Christians, about points of doctrine. Me and my roommate, I'm a mainstream Christian and he's an evangelical. We're not picking up guns and shooting each other. I'm not declaring a holy crusade against him. I'm not declaring a heretic who must burn to the stake. We have respectful debate about these things. Sometimes it gets a little passionate, but it is debate, not fighting. That's the difference. There's room for debate on the left. There needs to be debate on the left. Corporate Democrats are wrong about a lot of things, and the followers, because their actual leadership will never ever admit they're wrong because they're in the pockets of billionaires, but many of their followers need to see this. I'm aware that I'm echoing people like the line of the Communist Party of Germany before the Nazis took over, where they tried to win over the voters of the Social Democratic Party of Germany, the SPD, which is really more of a center-left party, despite calling themselves Social Democrats, because they used to be dominated by more Bernie Sanders types than essentially the corporate left. The center left took over the SPD more and more. And the KPD, they had their social fascism theory, which put it a little roughly, since the SPD was no longer social democratic at all. It was corporate left. It was center left, and it eventually encouraged its membership to work with the Nazis for the greater good of Germany. But the Communist Party said that you needed to win over the ordinary members and oppose the leadership of the SPD at the same time. That you had to make a distinction between voters and leaders. And that's true today. They were right about that, but at the same time, sometimes you're going to have to turn your back on the Democratic Party. That does not mean that you can't vote for them. You don't have to be a Democrat to vote for a Democrat in a presidential election. You can be a member of the Green Party, vote in their primaries. You can be a member of a socialist party, such as the Party for Socialism and Liberation. That's a Maoist party. I'm not a Maoist, but I'm just giving an example because they're one of the biggest ones. The Socialist Party USA, that's a Democratic Socialist Party. Ideologically, I'd be aligned with them, but they're so tiny and decrepit that they pretty much aren't a substantial political force. It's hard to rebuild them. I actually looked at trying to join them, but they just never got back to my emails or my messages, especially I needed a membership duty waiver. I'm not going to fee waiver. I'm disabled for long COVID. I'm not going to put my little money into paying dues to an organization that's decrepit and tiny that I'm not convinced isn't taken over by CIA monsters when I can't afford it. And I'm already risking homelessness if my YouTube doesn't grow. Too sick to work as well. I'm fighting to get my Social Security approved. We'll see if that works, but I suspect the government will try and make excuses to block it, despite my disability lawyer's optimism. So maybe this is just anxiety or pessimism. We'll see. But I suspect it's going to be a longer, harder fight than my lawyers think it will be. I have faith I'll still win in the end, but I think it's going to take longer than it should. Anyways. So people can, disagree. They can even form their own parties, but they still have to be able to come together, to protest together, to work together in common initiatives to block fascism. Otherwise, we're screwed, because we have fascists literally starting to label people who disagree with them enemies of the state. This is how it starts. We're all going to end up in the gulags eventually. First, they'll come for the far left, then they'll come for the center left. It's just they're gonna start with the most vulnerable, most marginalized, like the transgender and the anarchist elements. Then they're gonna come for the quote old left, like the traditional socialist communist, like PSL and stuff. They're already harassing the PSL, then they're going to come for, like the Democratic Socialists like myself, then they're going to come for the corporate Democrats. They're going to come for us all if we don't work together against the Trump administration. They are monsters. They are not representative of Christianity. They're representative of evil. I have my roommate's going to try and draw me over to his house group and I'm sure that I probably want nothing to do with these guys because here's an easy acid test. If I ask them, what do you think about endless war and the U.S. government? They're probably say, don't bring politics here, but you have to bring because the Trump administration claims to represent Christianity, has the endorsement of evangelical leaders, so it is an inherent part of what we're facing. And yeah, if we don't block them, if we don't push against this, then they're going to use that base of rabid far right fascist sorts and evangelicals who think that Trump represents them and stuff, and they are going to create a truly dystopian police state. It has to be stopped. That's enough for now. Wish you all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves. And be safe. And may you always find a guiding star to lead you home. Adieu and best luck to y'all.